Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Liz Lochhead's play, Blood and Ice. So this is a very stylized telling of the creation of Frankenstein. As many people know, you're all smart people watching this channel, as you possibly likely know, Mary Shelley wrote the novel Frankenstein, A New Prometheus, in 1816, when she was 19 years old. The story goes that Lord Byron, the poet, Percy Bysshe Shelley, the poet, who was married to Mary Wollstonecraft, later Mary Shelley, and some other friends. John Polidori was there, who was the sort of doctor of Lord Byron. They were in this sort of chateau in Switzerland, I think, during the summer of 1816. 1816, famously, the year without a summer, the sort of height of the Little Ice Age. It was such a cold summer that basically, crops couldn't grow. There was snow in July and things like this in Europe, the U.S., etc. It was a miserable year, and so they'd come to this sort of place, this holiday retreat, this vacation spot, and basically they were snowed in. There wasn't anything to do, so they took to reading these sort of German Gothic folk tales, these horror stories, and reputedly, what happened is that Byron gave everyone a challenge, and that challenge was everybody has to write their own horror story. Byron's sort of wasn't all that spectacular necessarily. Shelley's, Percy Shelley, my sense is it was sort of somewhat abstract and not really all that scary or all that interesting. John Polidori, actually, the germ of the idea that he had would go on to become his novel Vampire, or The Vampire, I can't remember. And that sort of set the stage for Bram Stoker's Dracula. But then Mary Shelley wrote basically an early version of Frankenstein. And so in this moment, in this sort of serendipitous moment where this group of people happen to be, and Byron gives them this challenge on the basis of there's nothing to do here, let's write these horror stories. You have sort of the origin of two of the most famous Gothic narratives, Frankenstein and ultimately Dracula. But Lochhead's play is not necessarily as interested in that, per se. What her play is interested in is sort of Mary Shelley's quite difficult life in some ways. She lost a number of children. I want to say 5 children who died either miscarriages or in infancy. Percy Shelley, her beloved husband, actually died by drowning in the Mediterranean, maybe the Adriatic. She and he had kind of been sort of persona non grata from English society because he was actually married to someone else when they took up together, and so a lot of people were really not thrilled with that. And so she had a very fraught life in many ways. She did, I think, struggle after Percy Shelley's death because his father was quite wealthy. Her parents were not wealthy, even though they were quite well known. Her parents were Mary Wollstonecraft was her mother, famous early feminist pioneer, vindication of the rights of women. For some reason, the name of her father has gone out of my head, but he was a big political writer, sort of crucial to capital L liberalism, in the vein of people like John Stuart Mill, John Locke, people like this. So her parents were quite famous, but they didn't necessarily have a lot of money. And also Mary Wollstonecraft died giving birth to Mary Shelley, so that was another aspect of her sort of difficult life. And she always apparently felt a decent amount of guilt about that. And so anyway, the play is sort of trans-temporal. It takes place over a number of different periods of Mary Shelley's life, but she sort of has this recurring encounter, is maybe a way of saying it, with the Frankenstein monster. And one of the things, one of the sort of thematic elements of this is the ambivalence of creation. Another sort of thematic element relates to sort of the issues of like which direction does the creative process go, right? Like, Mary Shelley creates Frankenstein, and more importantly, perhaps Frankenstein's monster, but in some ways, that story also creates Mary Shelley. Like, that becomes central to her identity, to her fame, what she is known for. And actually, the first line of the play is the creature's voice. It says, "Why did you make me, Frankenstein?" And so there is that sort of immediate element to it. And the creature speaks to Mary Shelley throughout. And it's often things like this. Another line here, "You should love this. The creator should not shun his creature." At one point, he calls her Frankenstein's Frankenstein. The creature says, "Frankenstein's Frankenstein, why did you make me? This must know." And he often refers to himself as this, capital T, this. Mary Shelley's response is, "Frankenstein's Frankenstein. Am I? I am. My God. Oh, had I known." Ellipse points. So yeah, there is a lot of this sort of ambivalence about creation, about the process of artistic development. And one of the things that Mary Shelley repeatedly does in this play, and we get this really right from the beginning, is she tries to sort of downplay her role in the creation of the Frankenstein story. So the first line I had already told you was the creature's voice, "Why did you make me, Frankenstein?" Mary, it's a sighing relief, says, "Nothing." The creature's voice in a whisper says, "Frankenstein," or asks Frankenstein. And Mary says, "Such dreams, night after night, such bad dreams. I go to my new book, for I will write it, I must. And dreams of that old one, the one that's done and dusted in print and out there in the world, making whatever stumbling way it can, for better or worse. Dreams of my infamous creation come back to haunt me. Come back to haunt me, and I cannot shake it off. I have the strongest presentiment something terrible is about to happen." So Mary Shelley is continually in the play sort of denying her own role as creator. She says, "This came to me as a dream. I wrote it down, but I didn't read it. I didn't come up with it." Sort of distancing of herself And this, of course, Frankenstein in the novel, he clearly is responsible of the monster, and yet he denies his. And this is part of the reason Frankenstein's monster, called in the novel Adam. This is part of the reason why Adam is so angry, so alienated within the novel, is because his creator denies him. And we're getting the same kind of thematic element in Lochhead's play. This is, I think, meant to be a sort of recognizable thematic connection, that we're supposed to see Mary Shelley in the same kind of space as Frankenstein is in her novel. That sort of denial of one's creative responsibilities is in some way detrimental. And yet, that denial of one's role as creator does not eliminate the creation. The creation is not contingent on the creator accepting their role, right? Frankenstein's monster, Adam, exists. He is his own being. He is his own thing that exists in the world, whether Frankenstein chooses to acknowledge him or not. The same kind of thing happens here. Mary Shelley denies her creative responsibility, her creative ability. She says that this was just dreams. I wrote it down, but it came from elsewhere. But it was not me. I, Mary Shelley, did not drive this. That doesn't change it. Nonetheless, she is confronted repeatedly by the creature. And this is, I think, an important component. Again, there is this sort of question of at least with big ideas like this, right? Because Frankenstein is a big idea at the end of the day. This idea of big ideas, I suppose, is more accurate, plural. This idea of the creation of life as such, this idea of the limits of science, the sort of boundary beyond which science should not go, and actually the, in some ways, glorious and terrifying ability to actually overcome that boundary. These are all big ideas, right? And Mary Shelley really pioneers these in this incredibly groundbreaking novel. And there is that sort of, maybe a philosophical question, I don't know, whether the creator creates or is created, right? Yes, on a very literal, sort of straightforward, direct level, Mary Shelley creates Frankenstein. She writes the book, she comes up with the idea, she works it out, she puts it in print, etc., etc. And that's true, but also, in a sense, quite boring. But on maybe a more abstract level, is Mary Shelley created by Frankenstein? And I mean that when I say Mary Shelley with that gesture, what I mean is the idea of Mary Shelley. Like, the idea that we, as literary people, as readers, as whatever it is, have of Mary Shelley, the author. So Mary Shelley, all caps, maybe, as opposed to Mary Shelley, lowercase. The idea of Mary Shelley is in many ways created by the existence of the novel Frankenstein. And so there is that mutually creative experience, element, structure. And I think that's a really philosophically interesting issue that this play delves into. And I think the life of Mary Shelley and the creation of Frankenstein really lend itself to asking that question.